Hey Collective, it's Alan coming to you with a video that will be following up on the short series I've been working on here on YouTube surrounding the topic of a soul's evolution and understanding the ascension process as it works through the great Earth Academy and kind of the ideology that comes with that type of statement. And one of the things I really wanted to do with this particular piece is ground the energy in a way that more people would understand what we are discussing when referring to the ascension process and the process by which we evolve over time. And seeing as most of us are moving into a higher state of consciousness, we're moving out of the more high school experience into the collegiate academy, where we start to be more soulful or mindful. We are now entering the stages where part of the collective consciousness is now moving into trying to master themselves, their emotions, their physical and their spiritual prowess, and moving towards an elevated state of consciousness where then some are even going on beyond that to stay and teach in kind of the different examples we have within our particular simulation that helps us really understand what that looks like in an actual physical avatar. Meaning, we're now discussing the topic of us possibly being the entrance exam for the soul into a much higher state of consciousness by the way that we operate and live our lives, and are we entering into the soulful state of being, or actually then becoming a walking masters or even a walking talking dissertation for the soul, and what we present to the world about our experience as an overall arc. So what I wanted to do with this one was kind of a little bit unusual, is I wanted to kind of take you guys into a frame of mind in which you might be able to contextualize what we're talking about in a simplified term. Not in a way that speaks down to anybody, but actually elevates everybody equally. And so what I want you to think about is how we train children in general, and how children develop over time, and the different stages of evolution that they walk upon in order to reach the maturation that they become as an adult before they start their own families and then begin the cycle over again. So what I wanted you guys to think about was to think about something that I had written to on LinkedIn a couple of years ago, where I had referenced the Earth Academy as being a developmental program, an academy for the soul in which they began as the most minuscule type of life form and slowly developed freedom over time so that they could learn the effects of cause and effect by first becoming what a director would state as the vessel of light, or the seed that then grows throughout different stages of evolution. So what I want you guys to think about is, if you can for a moment, suspend reality and imagine yourself as a kernel, an idea that needs to be crystallized into the physical world. And you would think back to even the Earth evolution as it was, where it began as molten lava and kind of the bacteria that began to grow within it, the germination of something new to come. And I want you to envision yourself then becoming the crystallized expression of that as a soul, as nothing more than a mineral, something that existed within the Earth Academy that let you know that you had all of the information you had in you, but you had to earn the ability to move throughout the different stages. So beyond the mineral, you then would become what we would call the plant or the vegetable stage, where you would actually start to do something interesting, which is you would begin to grow from the earth and sprout upwardly, following the sun, basically seeking enlightenment from the very beginning. And I want you guys to understand what that would be for a soul who was originally nothing more than a mineral or a rock. It had no place to move. It just had to learn to be in order to understand how it was connected to the overall arc of things, but with a limited range. So when you move as a soul into the plant and vegetable kingdom, you actually begin to have movement, and you begin the cycle of enlightenment where you look towards the sun and you move in that towards that direction. So in order to better understand it, think of it like this. Those two stages, the mineral and the plant stage, will be best suited for us as human beings to understand it as elementary school, where the mineral and the bacterial part are like pre-K and first grade, and then you begin to finish off elementary school by becoming a plant, because eventually you learn the process of ebb and flow, and that is what life is. In order to begin anew, something must end. So you would be ingested by an animal, let's say, and then you would continue through the process for yourself, becoming whatever it is, as this example would be, whatever ate you. And you would become that and learn the process of death and rebirth. So once you go through the elementary stage, you enter what we would call the junior high phase of a soul evolution, which would begin the process of being an animal, something closer to the ground but still living off of it, and learning the consequences to cause and effect, meaning actually survival. needing to learn how to survive within nature and learning the different processes that go along with that. Because if you think back to the plant stage, the end evolution of a plant would be a tree. And it would learn what it is to be human by being that tree because it houses all these different animals that would be the next part of its own process. And it's observing the world around it and learning an exchange with what we call Gaia, whatever you call Earth to be. And so you establish a very, very strong rapport about a give and take relationship. So by the time you become an animal, you are now living off of the vegetation that you once were. And now you have the freedom, but with freedom comes consequence. And so during that phase, you would be in the adolescent, prepubescent stage, would be junior high, and you would learn the cause and effect of what it is to go from an insect to then becoming a bird or then becoming a predatory animal. Understanding, though, that like when we're in junior high, you don't see yourself as a predator. You just see yourself as a survivalist. And understanding that it is in human terms looking backwards that we judge other more primitive life forms, and forgetting the fact that we more than likely were those life forms as we evolved over time. So the soul then begins the process of becoming what I call the domesticated expression of the master animal kingdom, meaning that most people would agree that the evolution of the animal kingdom would look something like becoming an insect, working your way through the caterpillar stage to the butterfly, becoming a bird, and all of that stuff, ending off in the predatory king of the jungle or queen of the jungle, and understanding that for the most part that is relegated towards lions and wolves. And learning what it is to be in pack mentality and learning the importance behind community as you go. But something interesting happens when humans appeared, where we actually actualize and crystallize into the human expression of the evolutionary model, where our conscience enters the fray and we learn what it is to be a family. And it's a super important phase for the soul's evolution because it begins to remember what this is about, only not purposely fully conscious of what's happening yet. So understand that as you enter into the high school freshman phase, you would be essentially transferring from the junior high expression into young adulthood, into the high school experience, which would look something a little unusual. If you end the animal kingdom as a king in the jungle, as a lion, or as a wolf, then what would be the two domesticated animals that humans keep around at all times as long as we can remember that would be a minimal example of those same characteristics in that same archetype, only in a fashion that could study what it was going to become before it transitioned? So I want you guys to think about a cat and a dog and how loyal the dogs are and how standoffish the cats can be. And realize that if an animal truly is the stage, that's the last stage before it becomes human, it would make absolute sense to us that they would need to learn how humans operate, to understand the dangers that come with living in human system and going from the wild and being domesticated into living in a house where you're dependent on another human. And to understand the consequence that comes from personality development and the soul's choice to either be a type of dog that is very loyal to human or a cat that is a little bit more standoffish. Thinking it in terms of, let's say if you're super spiritual, the dog would be more of the sun and the cat would be more of the moon, right? There would be a lot more shadow to the cat because it doesn't need you. You happen to be almost an inconvenience to it even though you feed it. Whereas a dog is super loyal and super excited always to see you. One is a big ball of energy, one is mysterious and kind of like broody. And so you understand that it's a great methodology for which the soul is incorporating itself into the human experience before making the transition. And then realizing as we now face ourselves in the awakening stage of coming to terms with the fact that we're not just animals anymore, but we come from that kingdom, that we understand why science is so heavily reliant on us being part of that kingdom, because it's the high school experience. The evolution of the soul has marched through all of those stages of evolution in order to get itself to human condition. But one of the things about being human is that you begin the process of being retaliatory, not paying attention to your intuition, losing sight of what you're meant to be doing, getting caught up in like game playing and getting caught up in the stuff that happens in a high school experience. And when you think in terms of that, you realize that the academy is a great place, a safe space for the most part, for the soul to understand at a human level with full consciousness appearing into itself, where the I am presence infiltrates itself into the world at large, that you are actualizing the soul's expression in a physical form as a human, with the ability to speak very clearly and command the world around you, but still have to be held accountable for the actions that you take. And so, whereas with the cat and dog, they're still living to survive, humans have an incredible gift of having a parent that has the ability to protect it, just like some of the animals do, but it's more industrialized, so there's a lot more safety to it. So what do we know about children is that when they develop as human beings, they seem almost connected to nature and to the environment in a way that is almost so spiritual that we as adults try to quiet it because it was too unusual for the longest of time. Only under this understanding, we're starting to realize that it was part of their evolution of coming through that cycle. But again, notice that as we look at this, you do go through a death rebirth process, and it's a flow of actualization as it moves up the corporate ladder, if you will, into an idealized state of itself, where the soul fully steps into its actual beingness. So what I want you guys to then look at is the environment that we live in as human beings, and kind of the slumbering state that we were for a very long time, where everybody told us what to do, where to go, what to do, and what we could and couldn't do, and all that stuff. And we were always relegated to someone else taking responsibility for our own actions, and realizing that most of us have adopted a collegiate experience or the high school experience, the idea of the great Earth Academy, as a school, because during the high school phase is where we get into the polarization, to the bullying, to the criminality, to breaking the rules, to being rebellious, to not listening to your parents, and to neglect your inner compass. And the consequences that come with that are usually paid off in high school, which will hopefully explain to you guys why so many of us look at Earth like an academy. So one of the interesting things that happen is that humanity then begins to awaken. And from that process, it becomes the I am presence, meaning the animalistic nature to us begins to be subdued by a higher principle of your higher mind, the mindfulness, the diminishing ego, and wanting to be of service to a community and understanding the importance of the acquired knowledge that your soul has accrued over that long of a period, and crystallizing it into the way that you operate within the world around you, which begins the process of what I call the collegiate entrance, your entrance exams. You start to become spiritual, leaving the dogma and leaving all of the hatred and intolerance. You start to go, I don't want to be that person. It makes me feel icky, or I'm suicidal, or I don't want to do this anymore. And you're stuck in a state where you feel like someone else is always controlling you. But you enter a phase spiritually where your soul connects with you at some point. Something happens in your life where you go, that was not me. I don't know how I got out of that situation. And so it's like a light bulb goes off, and you realize that you no longer need to be in high school, that you're finally ready to branch out and face the world around you with accountability, and that you know now you're going on a journey. And that is your entrance exam to the college experience I've been referring to for the past couple of videos. But one of the things about that is that college is an elective. And it's a super important part of our evolution as a collective consciousness to understand as we move forward. No one is required to go beyond the high school experience. You can stay animalistic, and you can stay, what do they call it, lizard people, which is a play on words of reptilian-like behavior, where you're greedy, you're stingy, you're a horrible person, you're corrupt, you do all of the worst traits because you think that no one's going to catch you and all this stuff. High school shit. But then you stop doing that out of nowhere, and you just go, I need to change this. I need to take accountability because I can't go on like this. And you elect to evolve. And you leave whatever it is that you were standing upon in order to find calmer shores. And that is what college is about. If we think about college, what do we learn from college? Is we leave the high school experience of cliques and bullying and all that stuff, and we find ourselves once more in a position of starting again. And that rebirth is a massively important step. But it is an elective. And you must submit some form of work, body of work, in this case, you, to the higher realms in order for your soul to truly connect to you and see if you're a viable avatar to even work with. Because you can't lead a dead horse to water. And so if someone really wants to be a horrible person, then why would they evolve towards the level of college? They would stay in the best phase of their life, which was the bully, horrible high school mentality, and they won't move forward. But much of our collective is deciding of its own free will, without a lot of interference, that it can't live like that. And so it's entered the collegiate and now taking those classes. And a lot of people are now stepping into the idea of spirituality without dogma, still understanding that we need religion in order to move forward, because that's how you enter the halls at all. And so we understand that now we're starting to approach different topics in different ways. But you can't really do that until you learn who you are, and that is what college is about. Who am I? I'm free. It's called gaining your freedom. But what do you do with that freedom? Who are you now that no one is judging you or no one's keeping you down? Now you're fully accountable for your own actions, and a lot of the trouble that we get into happens around the college experience because now no one's telling us what to do. And so not only do we have to learn accountability, but we have to learn consequence. And sometimes they're very dire. Drinking too much can lead to a lot. Partying too much leads to a lot of problems. And so a lot of the class that we are in is trying to overcome that and master themselves in those departments. And it's not easy because we're like diamonds. We're flawed. That's what makes us beautiful. That's what makes us shine. That's what makes us worth more, is the fact that we are flawed, but we start to identify the flaws as we start to move forward from that phase. So what I wanted to say with this is for those of you who are in the collegiate experience, when you look at the world from that lens, it gives you an incredible amount of empowerment to realize just how much you've already survived just to be a human. And when we look at the word human, we look at the word for two parts, HU-MAN. And I always, when in written form, I write it HUE, as in hue, different colors, dash man. Meaning that as a solidified physical avatar, we have a coat of many colors. Humans come in all different shapes and sizes, different colors, different sexualities. There's so much variance into it that it makes the experience interesting for all of us, because who wants to be in a school where everybody's identical? So in the college experience, what you're looking for is things that expand your mind and expand your consciousness and help you get through some of the worst things you're ever going to encounter. And as you go through your life, you're starting to realize that there are people that have been hidden in plain sight your entire life that have been guiding you as teachers, and you may not have seen them at first because you weren't ready. And I'm going to give you a perfect example of someone that I find to be an actualized divine feminine teacher that you may not have seen. And her name is Jewel, the singer Jewel. And if you don't believe me, I want you to go and see the interview that she did a month ago with Joe Rogan, who is another interesting figure in human evolution and someone I greatly love and admire because he did something that gave him his crowning achievement. He got the jewel for his crown because the day that he sat with her, you guys are going to be blown away about how present his soul was in conversation with someone who has been through everything. Who, if you get an opportunity, do me a favor after this video, go and watch the entirety of the episode. It's a 3 hours and 45 minutes or almost 4 hours podcast. And I sat through every second of it. And I'm going to get to why in a moment. But you wouldn't think of her as a teacher, would you? And you guys notice that in the recent videos, I've been specifically pointing out people who have the skill set of taking a parable or a life lesson and setting it to music. Because I used to always be fascinated and tickled by the idea that if Jesus ever came back, that he would set it to music because he did so much creative work. And I always thought that I was tickled. But I've spoken to specifically my love and admiration for certain people and have specifically pointed them out for more than just, superficial reasons. And I've started with Coldplay and specifically Chris Martin. And then, of course, I've talked about Imagine Dragons because this unicorn dreams of dragons, and Dan Reynolds. I've talked to you about Dolly Parton. I've talked to you about Taylor Swift. I've talked to you about Reba McEntire, and now I'm talking to you about Jewel. And the reason I'm talking to you about this is because you wouldn't think that these people who have reached a certain level of success could do anything outside of pop culture, forgetting that the great architect is everyone. And there's a great ability for him to teach in ways that speak to different audiences, which plays back to the last video I just did, about not underestimating another teacher's style because you never know what their target audience is, and this is the payoff for that. So if you get the chance, I cannot say it enough, go see Joe and Jewel, have that interview, and your life will be changed because you will find a lot more validation to the ascension process than you ever thought could happen out of a very organic conversation that actually touches into what divine masculine and feminines might be looking forward to next, which would be teaching and finding a way to redo education so as to truly prepare the world as it changes, right? And one of the great points that Jewel made there, and I'm going to stop harping on her, but I'm super blown away by her, she mentioned that the original plan set us up for industrialization, but as we move forward, it's not adjusting itself to meet the new criteria of the evolutionary model that we are. And I'm going to let her speak for herself beyond that, because obviously we've all been working on this independently, but you're starting to see the timelines come towards each other, and they're starting to interact with each other, even if not directly. And it is for a reason. So for those of you who are in the collegiate experience, understand that college is where you find yourself. And you have to face your shadow as best you can, because before you know it, you're going to be graduating. But please do not be under the misconception that you will have it figured out by the time that you graduate college, because you still have to go into the master's program, which is once you've learned the information and the wisdom and you've acquired a lot of skill sets and your ear starts to be trained to hear truth, even in a bunch of lies, then what ends up happening is that you then have to put that into motion and you have to put it into your actual life path. And that takes a lot of concerted effort to face yourself. And when you face yourself, you have to understand what it is, why you're doing things, where it comes from, and so forth. And I'll let Jewel, again, speak to that because you did a brilliant job. And I've spoken, we've all spoken about it in different forms that we didn't know we were all working on something similar, but it's part of evolution, right? It always finds a way. So understand that you're going to then have to put what you've learned academically over the course of time into actual physical form and actually do something with it. So understanding that is the next part for those of you who are now finishing your high school diplomas or your college diplomas, and now you're focused more on, well, what do I do in the world with what I've learned as a soul? And that's a lot different than regular college academics, right? That is now a soul working now on conquering itself in the physical, in the mental, and in the spiritual forms. And the purging that comes with the process over a course of time. Specifically, as a hint, with the number 7. I'm just going to say that. Because in the 7th day, maybe you'll rest. But what ends up happening in those cycles is that you come face to face with your shadow. And your task is intermixed with everyday to-day actions because you're under the pressure cooker. Because if you're going to break, it's better to break before you're facing the world at large than it is to crumble when suddenly a lot of attention comes your way because of something you're working on. So it's part of that process, right? When you get your degree, you go and you basically audition for jobs, and you go and you do different internships and things like that in order to find what's best suited for you. But you're still not fully grounded on the ground. You're still trepidatious. You don't know what to do exactly. You just know you have to pick a career, and then hopefully you hope that you pick the right career for who you are. But more often than not, during that process, you also have to live your life, and you have to face the consequences of your shadow that will now have the money and resources to do whatever it wants to do, which is why a lot of people go into drugs, alcohol, or other things. I mean, this is a super spiritual concept, but I'm just grounding in a way where you guys can understand what I'm speaking to. So understand that now you have the money to pay for whatever your vices are, and you have to conquer that before you enter the master's program. And one of the things about mastery is that you don't then just have to face your shadow, but you have to understand that you must learn to coexist with the shadow, because otherwise why would you even be on Earth? If you have no karma and nothing else to pay down, and you've mastered everything you can master, then why would you stay in such a turbulent environment? If not to understand the pressure cooker and understand that you must stand alone on the mountain, and the day you can do that, the master program opens to you. And then you go on to what I call the dark night of the soul journey for a lot of people, which is a concept in which souls that have actualized and remembered who they are suddenly begin connecting to higher concepts than just themselves. They start to lose interest with just self-service because at some point along the journey, they realize that they are healing the wounds that existed as the child and as the person evolved into that experience. So when you get to that point in life, you start to detach from the physical of you only, and you become we-focused. And that's part of the master's program that we are a class of. And it's basically the actualization of how do you then ground the information that you've learned and earned through life's lessons, and how you converted them into blessings in a way that will reach an audience that will grasp fully what it is that you're trying to tell them. Because with life comes ebbs and flows. And for those of us who are graduating that are not staying behind to be a teacher, understand that there's a process called the death process. And with so many of the baby boomers now exiting the academy in short order, we're going to have to be grounded in love and light. So before I get into that topic, I want you guys to think about all of the things that you've been through. And if any of you have overcome any of them, you have a calling that begins to organically manifest within your soul, if you believe in chakras, that starts to move up. to your auditory skill, because you're the only animal that we know of that can communicate so clearly thoughts and ideas and crystallize things from the higher realm, right, from your higher mind. In fact, most of the teachers you'll find all speak to a inner monologue that happens between them and their soul, as I put it, or Jewel put it as her higher mind. I forgot what she said. But each teacher speaks to it differently because it's their personal life experience that no one can rob of them. But you begin to want to serve humanity in the master's program. And part of that process has to do with having faced your shadow, understanding your triggers, coming to terms with what you should and should not be doing, and taking full accountability for what the reaction or consequences are to what we do daily. And just so you guys know, there are certain things that will not be triggers anymore, but you will still be passionate by. For example, I always get mad about children being raped or trafficked or any type of child abuse. It's a big thing for me. It's not ever going to go away, and nor should it, because that's part of humanity. We are beings that are supposed to protect the youngest and most vulnerable of our community, and everybody seems to be ignoring all these Epstein dickheads and all these other people doing horrible things, and everybody turns a blind eye, but then goes after like the gay guy or the woman or whatever. I'm like, wait a minute, what? So understand that when you're walking your path, there will be shadow that you will purposely keep that is not of detriment to society and not detriment to who you are, but that actually serves to drive you in something that you are passionate about that you may be able to serve later at a much higher consciousness. And that epiphany is really important for those of you who run around like I used to and try to get rid of all of your shadow, not realizing that without shadow, there's nothing grounding you. You're not really a human anymore. So understanding it is the best principle to understand that you're at the graduate level of the college level, is because you start to realize that you have to learn how to cope with it and how to keep it at bay by actually facing it instead of ignoring it. And that's a really hard process because it takes full accountability, and you realize just how much you put yourself in jeopardy and just what the consequences are to free will, which is kind of the point of the college to begin with, right? You have to learn cause and effect. Before you become a co-creator of the universe or the world at large, you must learn the consequences to each action you take, which is why you start as a mineral. You learn how to adapt to the environment that you are, and you learn how to just be so as to literally be present and so as to prepare the momentum needed to get you forward through all of the different levels of each class that you're going to have to take over time, understanding that many of us will flunk the same classes over and over and over and over again because we're stubborn. And you'll understand that more as you go on, but understand that it takes as long as you want it to take. So you could be here for hundreds of millions of years if you wanted to be, I guess, in this theory. But understand that it's not a race. It's kind of about, the point is, will you be a graduate? Can you make it? And in order to make it, sometimes you as a soul will challenge yourself in ways that other people could not survive. And that's not a badge of honor. It has to do with the soul and whatever its mission is down the road. So for those of you who are at the collegiate experience and is getting ready to enter the master's program, understand that you are then responding to a mission call that is coming up from within you, that you are actualizing into verbiage that speaks it into the universe. So the universe can meet you, whatever you believe God or whatever the energy to be. It's meeting you so as to make your dreams come true in a life of service that best fits your skill set and what you've acquired over so much time. But it takes an incredible amount of presence, an incredible amount of I am here 24/7, choosing everything that I do and not reacting for no reason. Because one of the things that we've learned when we're in slumber is that we get really easily triggered by other people, and we do it unconsciously at first until we enter the collegiate experience and start taking accountability as we work towards the masters. Because suddenly we're faced with the fact, well, why am I letting someone else take control of my life, and why am I reacting to them anyway? Why am I handing them power? All of these questions become so important to you that you start prioritizing your spirituality and your soul into the most important part of your life, if you're spiritual, or for other of you, your happiness and your health. All of these things become your priority because of what you've accrued and what you've learned. But many of you who enter the master's program are going to have to face your master's entrance exams, which basically is what is your area of specialty. So it's super important that we as a collective consciousness understand that a lot of what's brewing underneath is kicking up junk that we must face in order to then fully understand what it is we'll be dealing with in the future. because a lot of us will be handed everything we've ever wanted, and we're going to get everything we needed, and there will be a table set. But if we don't first understand the responsibility that comes with that table, then why would you sit there? And so understand that there is a lot of maybe possible people that are on the cut to get into a college and then into specifically to a master's program, but it can be a little competitive because why are we going to hand, spiritually speaking, why would the elders or masters ever deal with someone who they know is not going to get past a certain level because they refuse to take accountability or they're really, you know what I mean? Like there's a lot of deterrents. But the person who overcomes those and stops flunking after a while is an interesting vessel, a light for the higher realms. The person who is at the bottom, where people laugh at them and step on them, treat them like shit, treat them like they're crazy, speak of them illful, making fun of them when they fall, all of that stuff is super fascinating when they step before the world, having a lot more answers than other people who have all the money in the world but have no love and no light. And these vessels step before you full of love and light when they shouldn't. And who do they love? Everyone equally, even the people that treated them the most like shit. And that is a lot of forgiveness, and it comes with the process of actualizing your life purpose and speaking into the universe what is best suited for you, setting boundaries and understanding that you're now looking for what your path will be in the new world, what you've created with such a long trajectory. So the interesting part of that is that you have to be willing to understand your faults to such a degree that you have to allow other people that come into your circle at that point when you start to build your communities to see it and to understand them and to realize that they're not going to hate you or dislike you because you're just being you. And you're at a level in your life where if you're choosing to have a conversation that can be a little bitey, that maybe everyone needs to sit down for a minute and understand what is the bite, where is that coming from? And so you're now entering the master's program before finally realizing that no one has the power over you infinitely except the great architect, and he's trying to hand you the keys to your own palace. And only you can open the door. But in order to do that, you have to be fully accountable for everything you do. And you have to prove yourself over a very treacherous, sometimes challenging, and crazy-ass experience that most people would never survive because they need to know that you can handle the responsibility that comes with true power in the world. And it's what separates men from mice. And here's what I mean. You can give a human being all the money in the world, but if they don't value other people and they don't have love and light in their hearts, then they are worthless to the greater construct of the universe. And what I mean is, if you're going to hand someone a crown, they need to know how to wear it. And they need to make sure that they care of all of the people in their community equally, or at least do their best to always think about everyone involved to the best of their capabilities. And you can always tell where people fail this exam because they get all the money in the world and don't give to charity, becoming so disconnected from reality that they surround with yes-sayers to their livelihood. And this is not a judgment call, it's just a fact. But they surround themselves with people who are working for them, believing that the entire world will then also be following suit. And it's a very destructive pattern because eventually they alienate people who really care about them. They believe everybody's out to get them, and it turns into a toxin that is really hard to clean out without going through a very deep and harsh purification, which is kind of 2025, just not to surprise everybody, but I've already told you that. So when those towers come crashing down for these people, it'll be the people who are now graduating the master's program who will have to endure or at least be able to deal and converse with people who've lost it all because we have already gone through that phase. And maybe we didn't have all the money in the world, but the things that we have overcome, like child rape, all these other horrible things that I'm talking to have overcome, and things that other people just cannot believe is possible to survive, we did. And we didn't kill ourselves, which is the biggest point, right? These masters will then be able to look at the next class who have a lot further to fall because they bet all their money on money. And they didn't realize that the truest, happiest people on planet Earth will be people who put other people before themselves without being detrimental to themselves. Meaning that they learn to take care of themselves and they seek other people who know how to take care of themselves. They are whole as human beings and have now a skill set that can help other people find that serenity and that stability in order to meet their partners and then crystallize and create something new and expansive, like possibly a school if some of us want to work together, that actually is specialized for this type of behavioral analysis, from spiritual lenses, from scientific lenses, from all of that stuff, from people who've actually walked through the fire and are still here. And that's a super important part for those of you who want to enter the master's program, is it's not just about you, it's about all of us. And when you are willing to serve humanity, a new door will open. But to do it, you have to face all of you, warts and all. And it's not as scary as you think. It's just how much you want to avoid the homework that you have to do. So understand, for those of you who are going through this process, you are going to have really beautiful tasks, but some of them are a little harder than others. And your own personal life experience may give you a little foreshadowing as to who you can help along the way. Because when you get to where you're going, you're always supposed to turn around and help the next student as a mentor or a brother or a sister. And understand that in the collegiate programs, those who go into this mastery program are an elite fraternity/sorority. This is not for everybody. Most people have a hard time just mastering themselves. But to then do that and know that you can exit the academy in peace and light, but to then turn around and stay in order to help other people do it, is a different type of task. And there's no wrong or right way to face that. Everyone has their own individual choices. It's a free will state. But understand that this particular fraternity and sorority is so elite that it's very hard to get into, because it heavily relies you on surrendering to the universe and understanding that whatever happens to you is there to teach you. And when your awareness is fully conscious, anytime that you run into stuff, you are faced with a choice of whether you can react involuntarily or react consciously. And that difference sets the tone for the world around you. And you begin to change energetically everything about you and the environment that you live and reside in, where you work, what you're going to put up with. And it just changes the world that is the world around you, period. So understand that it's a very elite program. And as we walk the path, a new door is beginning to open, where said teachers are being brought together to what I have called the walking, talking dissertation, where some souls who used to exit the academy having mastered and having left breadcrumbs for others are now staying behind to help the next wave of students do something called mastering themselves and helping them navigate some of the harshest seas that have ever been seen by humanity, because of the sheer amount of people that exist and the volume versus the people that are prepared for what's to come. And so those people are part of a dissertation that is on a collective scale, meaning that many of them will be brought towards each other and have to go through an additional set of trials and tribulations that is really can be messy, right? And it's those communities that we built from those twin flames or from those soulmates. Because remember, a twin flame has reportedly has a sexual dynamic to it, because it's the twin souls being brought together and they are already whole, so they create the infinity ring. But that's not everybody. Most people are soulmates, meaning that it can be platonic. You can have a brother and you can have a sister that's not, you know what I mean? Like, you're not sexually involved with everybody on planet Earth. So understand that these soul tribes and these soul pods are now built of teachers, each with different skill sets, musicians and writers, or engineers and musicians. You know, any combination of people who teach the world through love and light and are willing to share their stories so as to somehow create a system that helps raise everyone up equally so as to meet the next leg of the journey, which is when you enter into the soulful, mindful experience of life, where you're willing to make that your priority, and how you interact with the world affects other people. And you learn true responsibility for what real power looks like for a soul, and its fully maturation of itself into the physical world through whatever avatar is the highest timeline for that soul. And then they have a job to do. And that job that they're doing is the end of that flow. It's the end of that epoch And part of that process is to then do something on behalf of humanity. And I specifically have a soft spot for education. I have a soft spot for helping the children of our planet because they are under siege and so forth. So those teachers, the ones that have mastered themselves, are now speaking outwardly, and they're bringing the focus of others that are at the same level. And when they start to form into their pods, they will change the world around them. But there's a part to this that we have to discuss, which is not everyone goes on to college. And some people will go home. And with so many people within our collective in the baby boomer phase of evolution, with such a sheer amount of people, some of us are going to have to transition a lot of people as peacefully and as with as much love and light as we can. And so for this, I'm going to turn to you guys and ask you to do me, I'm going to give you 2 homework assignments if you want. The first one is to go see, or I should say there was another, the Jewel interview was one part of it, but there's going to be 2 videos I want you guys to see, which will be the second half of it. And the first one is going to be James Blunt's Monsters, where he helps his father deal with the death process. And the reason I'm telling you this isn't to be a Debbie Downer or to be too much of a realist, but understand with so much of the population at the end of the scholastic school year, the best thing that we can do as their children and as students that are understanding what's at play and what's to come for them is to be ready for those days when we have to let them go, and to help them have the most beautiful and safest transition that they can have with as much love and compassion as we can muster, even if we don't like them. And understand that it is part of our collective test. If we can show why humanity is so special in that way, then we may be able to go on. And what I really want you guys to think about when you see that song is to understand how hard it is to look at someone you love with all of your heart, who has been there your entire life. And I want you to realize that the biggest blessing you can ever give them is on that fateful day to tell them that you will be okay. As someone I'm a part of the Dead Parents Committee. I lost my mother, who's the last of my parents, when I was 26. I did this myself, so I can testify to this. I walked into, I'm shorting the story by a great deal. One day I'll share the entirety of it. But essentially what happened is that on that fateful day, she had flatlined a couple of times. My dad came and got me. It was a very short conversation. I walked in and immediately asked the doctor what the percentage was, because she had flatlined so much that she would come back without being a vegetable. And he told me, and it was below the conversational point that we had discussed beforehand because of something else that had happened. And so I was left with the responsibility of telling the doctor what to do. And because she had gone through so much without oxygen, I had to do the impossible, which I had to go up to her and very politely say to my mother, no tears, strong as can be, and say, Mom, I can tell you're tired, and I can tell you want to let go of the body. If this is the time that we part, I will be okay. Dad will be okay. My stepdad, not my, yeah. So my stepdad will be okay. I will be okay. We will have each other. And I knew that was not true. I knew that was not true. But you do that for your loved ones. And I knew that I wasn't going to be okay. I was not ready to not have any parents. But I had to do what was best for my mother. And the moment I said to her, where I said, we will be okay, you can go, she died. And we didn't bring her back. So as I sat there holding her hand, I started to play with her hair because she used to love that. It used to soothe her. And what I was trying to do without being even fully conscious yet is to allow her the peace and grace to let go without worrying about us. After everything she had been through, I could not fathom the idea of anchoring her into a world where she thought I couldn't make it or that I was scared. And so I bold-faced told her I would be okay, even though I knew my world was coming down. And I waited till the hair died, and then I left the room. The reason I'm sharing this story with you is that there's a level of experience that I have that is of service to many of you in the future. Because our parents can't live forever. And death is unfortunately part of the exiting of the academy. And if we can rely on each other as a community to help the X generation, which will be the one hit the hardest. Remember, baby boomers are a massive population, but X the generation that follows, is a very small generation. And they will be bearing the brunt of trying to exit all of these people together. And they will need to rely on, Z? And the millennials to support the system. And so understand that part of the ebb and flow of life is facing the shadow. And so for those of you who are teachers or working on your master's degree for yourself, understand that something that we can all do at a ground level is support other people who are going through the release of their parents during this phase. Because nothing's ever promised. And to understand that part of the death process doesn't just teach them. Because wasn't it in Harry Potter where Dumbledore says to Harry, what did he say? Don't worry about the dead. Don't pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living. They have to survive. And it's going to be super important for us with such a mass amount of people leaving the academy to be there for each other. So as we make our way through the evolutionary ladder, I needed to take a moment to explain the ebb and flow of life and the death rebirth process, so as to hopefully instill in you guys that it doesn't just end there if we tell them that it doesn't. And this is where faith is important. I'm not going to preach, but I'm saying if you expect nothing to be there on the other side, then that's what you will get. But I know for me, I wanted my mom to think that there would be something there because it gave her peace. And if that's the best we can do with faith, then we have done something incredibly beautiful with our lives. So with life, understand though that as you release them, they have overcome so much during the trajectory of their soul that their soul will forever be thankful to you for letting them go home. And what you tell them home is the greatest blessing you can give another human being. So for those of you who understand the entirety of this message and understand why it's so important for us to be there for each other now, understand that there are other things that are on the other side of 2025 with the cleaning of the house and all of the corruption, all of the hypocrisy, and all the child rape, and all of the people doing horrible things that are billionaires and millionaires. All of that comes crashing down around them in that era of results. And understand that we're still going to have to be compassionate to the people who have consequences to their actions. And that is what being a teacher is to be responsible not just for one student, but to be there as a brother and sister or a mentor or a friend to all students, even if you don't always agree with them. And understand that it is the only way to uplift humanity beyond the shadow nature, is to show them compassion, love, and light. But it's a journey. Start to celebrate each other when those journeys end, and understand that it's much healthier and better psychically, spiritually, in the mental space for you to release them in joy and love, believing that they're going somewhere beautiful, than to mourn them and anchor them into the idea that they're going somewhere dark. But only you can be the vessel of such change. And for those of you who are in the collegiate experience or entering the soulful, mindful experience, one of the best things you can do for another person is to love them and to let them go. Sometimes it's the only way for someone to go on and reset. Everyone loves a vacation. So for those of you who have aging parents, get used to the idea and know that you're not manifesting it by preparing yourself. But the more you're able to face them without crying and doing that stuff that makes them feel sad about their leaving, and the more that you can celebrate the life that they've had and how much love you have for them, the more at peace they leave the academy before they come back for the next session. And you never know, they could be a grandkid, or they could be a great-great-grandkid that comes back into your family line, or however it plays out. We don't know the infinite shores beyond the veil. But what we can do is give them the best possible ideation of how that might go in order to really help them transition. For those of you who stay behind and are going to be going on as teachers, start finding each other and listening to the voice of who they truly are, and understand that they are there to be cohorts in your class, and that you have an incredible ability to really change the world around you. And some of the best thing that you can do as a professor, as a teacher, is learn how to communicate with everyone equally in ways that ground energy from a higher state of consciousness to the earthly plane, which is why I spoke to in this video about the soul's evolution through each of those phases, so as to help each of us understand that it is a long journey, but it is a beautiful one. And it is the greatest gift that we'll ever have. So the more we band together and restructure our communities in a way that really helps people deal with all of life's lessons, in a way where you can speak from your heart to what you physically have endured or overcome, and how you somehow manage to survive it and not giving up, will be a massive, massive help to the world around you going forward. And that's where I want to leave it for today. I hope you guys have an incredibly blessed day, and I really appreciate you stopping by for the video. Bye.